Coming up on Network Africa. Bus and lorry crash kills at least 16 people in Uganda. At least another 14 people die after buses collide in Ivory Coast. Plus, Sudan arrests wanted Eritrean human smuggler. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. At least 16 people have been killed when a passenger bus rammed into a stationary lorry this morning on a Ugandan highway that links the capital Kampala to the northern town of Gulu. Police say 12 people died on the spot, while 4 others died later at a hospital. Several other travelers on the bus were injured. The lorry was said to have been parked and loading cargo about a kilometer from Kamdini Corner, a popular stopover and checkpoint in the north of the country. There have been worrying levels of road carnage in the country in recent weeks, especially over the festive season. A traffic police report earlier this week revealed that 104 road accidents had been recorded between the 30th December and the 1st of January. At least 35 people were killed in these road crashes alone. Another 14 people have died and dozens others were injured yesterday after 2 buses collided on the outskirts of Ivory Coast's capital, Yamoussoukro. The victims who died were 9 men and 5 women, while more than 70 were injured and taken to hospital. One of the buses was carrying mourners, including foreigners heading to a funeral of a woman who had died in Europe. The exact cause of the accident has not been established. In a statement posted on Facebook, the Ivorian Transport Minister expressed condolences to the families of those who died. The ministry also called on motorists and road users to be more vigilant to avoid such accidents. In Sudan, hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets of the capital, Khartoum, to demand the country's military rulers leave power. The demonstrators also rejected a deal struck weeks ago for the gradual transfer of power to civilian leaders. A military coup in October 2021 abruptly ended a previous democratic transition agreement with protest leaders. The protest was led by the resistance committees, a grassroots group that has steadfastly rejected any negotiations with Sudan's military leaders, General Abdel Fattah Burhan and General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. Last month, the 2 military leaders signed a framework agreement with Sudan's main pro-democracy group. The agreement between military and civilian leaders also avoided sensitive political issues concerning transitional justice and reforming the military, a policy that promises to see various armed factions within Sudan integrate into one fighting force. And Interpol is reporting that a notorious people smuggler accused of cruel and violent treatment of migrants has been arrested in Sudan. Kidani Haftamariam from Eritrea has been wanted by police in Ethiopia and the Netherlands. The International Policing Agency says the Eritrean national headed a major criminal organization between the kidnapping, extortion and murder of East African migrants. They believe this may be a rare breakthrough in the struggle to stop the cruel and unscrupulous traffickers who have caused the deaths of so many. He was arrested after police in the United Arab Emirates focused on money laundering activities and found him in Sudan. Interpol says this bust, achieved by a cooperation of different countries, has dealt a significant blow to a major smuggling route towards Europe. Kidani was convicted in absentia and sentenced to life imprisonment after escaping from custody in Ethiopia while on trial on people smuggling charges in 2020. The trend of individuals and families migrating is not new, but when a teeming population of youths move because of failure on the part of a government or system, then it needs to be checked. This is the view of a Nigerian-American professor of global affairs and politics, Oyetunde Odugbesan Omede. She believes that migration will always exist, but it's the responsibility of government to make the country favorable for those who want to stay.
You may leave one place, one location for greener pastures somewhere else. But even in that greener pastures exists a unique problem that is unique to that location. So I understand people's choice of wanting to leave, and people have the freedom of movement. So they can make the best decisions that they want for themselves and for their family. But at the same time, it would be a disservice to the country if a multitude of people are leaving because they feel as though the government is not providing their needs or their high levels of insecurity where they can't reach their fullest potential. That becomes a deficit for the country. And that's something that any government should always take a look at. If there are high levels of the population who want to leave but cannot leave, who risk their lives to leave, and who would rather live in a different country. We live in a globalized world, and oftentimes people leave countries for many different reasons. Doesn't necessarily mean that the country is not functioning to the ability of what they, perceive it to be. It may be for personal reasons. It may be for a variety of reasons. So we have to take that into account, that in the world we live in, we have what we call boundaryless careerists, right? We have people who are independent contractors, people who are working from home and work for another country in a different part of the world. And so it's not only just external threats that push people to leave their countries. The world that we live in oftentimes calls people to go to different destinations just because of the nature of their work or the nature of opportunities that may exist. But the idea, of course, for any government is to harness the potential and the population that they have. So you want to have that balance and that mind frame that, yes, globalization is there. So it means that people are going to move. There's a movement of people, a movement of services, a movement of goods that is bound to happen. But at the same time, let us make the environment conducive to those that stay.
To catch the full interview with Professor Yetunde Odugbesan Omede, do watch Diaspora Network on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on Channels Television. Other stories now. Soldiers in the breakaway region of Somaliland have withdrawn from a disputed town after several days of deadly violence. Opposition parties and human rights organizations accused the troops of killing at least 10 people during protests last week in the town of Las Anod. The demonstrators took to the streets after gunmen killed a politician. According to the local mayor, military leaders had ordered troops to return to the barracks so that the situation could normalize. Las Anod is claimed by Somaliland, which declared independence from Somalia in 1991, as well as Puntland, a region in northern Somalia. The government in Chad says security forces have foiled an attempt by a group of army officers to destabilize the country. According to a statement released by the government, 11 army officers were involved, and security services have been arresting people linked to the plot since December the 8th. The statement added that the head of the plot is the president of the Chadian Human Rights Organization. Chad has been relatively unstable since April last year, when the long-time ruler Idris Deby died after visiting the front line to fight rebels. His son, Mohamed Deby, then seized power. Authorities in Ghana are set to toughen entry restrictions from today, citing an increase in COVID-19 cases in China. All air travelers arriving from China will now be required to present a negative PCR COVID test result not older than 48 hours before departure and undergo another test on arrival in Ghana's Kotoka International Airport at no cost. The Ghana Airports Company Limited, which announced the updated guidelines on its website, adds that all persons arriving in Ghana who are fully vaccinated will be exempted from any form of testing done either prior to boarding from an originating country or on arrival in Ghana, except passengers originating their journey from China. According to the GACL, non-Ghanaians traveling to Kotoka International Airport with fake vaccination certificates will be quarantined and returned to the point of boarding at their cost. The GACL is also quoted as saying airlines that bring passengers to Ghana who are not fully vaccinated or passengers originating their journey from China without a valid negative COVID-19 PCR test result 48 hours prior to the departure would be surcharged $3,500. Let's bring in Joy News' Maxwell Agbagba to speak some more about this. Maxwell, great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Joker.
Right, so has Ghana lifted all COVID-19 restrictions 2 years after the pandemic, now that we see, these new rules, especially because of the cases in China?
Yeah. Yes, Ghana lifted all of its restrictions, and that happened sometime in March 2022. What happened was that we experienced a spike in our cases and deaths, and then the numbers started to reduce. So that necessitated the lifting of all, the restrictions. So that has been the case until China started recording a surge in its cases, with reports suggesting nearly 18% of the population likely contracted the virus in the first 20 days of December. So in response to that, like you mentioned, the Ghana Airport Company released a statement that said passengers originating their journey from China will be required to present a valid negative COVID-19 PCR test results 48 hours prior to departure from the originating country. Now, in addition to that, the passengers will be required to undergo mandatory COVID-19 testing on arrival at the Kotoka International Airport. In fact, all airlines that do not respect this directive or flout this directive will be surcharged $3,500 token.
Right. So, Maxwell, I'm not sure how many other African countries at this time have gone this route. I know that people here in Nigeria have been wondering when the Nigerian government will start restricting or will start applying the same rules to passengers coming from China to Nigeria. But how much of a volume do you see of people coming in from China to Ghana for this position to be taken at this time?
Well, we know that we have, some trade relations with China. In fact, there are many people from Ghana here, businesswomen, businessmen, who go to China to bring in all kinds of goods to sell in our market. So really, China has been a very big trade, or trade partner, for us. But that was actually affected during the pandemic, with many Ghanaians unable to visit the country to bring in goods, to come and sell. So that relationship, that trade relationship, is there. But of course, the government is concerned about reports of an increase in COVID-19 cases in China. So we just following what other countries are doing, like Italy, Italy, the United States, France, the UK, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea, India, Malaysia, Israel, Qatar, Taiwan, Spain, all of them have imposed fresh travel restriction on travelers from China. So what we're doing right now is to nip the situation in the bud, because there are concerns that if we do not do that and we import, get an importation of this virus here in Ghana, we may go back to the old days when, we're all struggling, to contain the pandemic. Okay.
Right. So what's the COVID vaccination rate in Ghana?
Well, the latest figures, as we have it, the total COVID-19 vaccines administered, we told 21 million. That's 69.5% of the total Ghanaian population. Quite impressive. Persons who've received at least one dose, we told 12 million people, representing 67% of the 18.2 million target. That is the target of the total, 38.6% of the total Ghanaian population. And then persons who've been fully vaccinated, we know of 9 million people, representing 50.3% of the 18.2 million target. And then 28, and then persons who've received the first booster dose, we know of 2 million people. Okay.
Right, so the pandemic has not entirely gone away. We get that all the time, even from the WHO and other, health agencies. Are Ghanaians still conscious of this, and do they show it in their actions as well?
Well, Joker, to be honest, until the recent developments, in China, many of us had forgotten that COVID-19 even existed, because all the restrictions, like I mentioned, had been lifted. There were very big concerts. I attended some of them personally, like Afrochella, like Afro Nation, and more. I did not find anyone, wearing face masks. It is even difficult to actually find face masks to buy in town these days. During the peak of the pandemic, you find people selling them in traffic. Any convenience shop you visit, you will find, face masks to buy. But these days, it's actually difficult to even find it to buy in traffic. It was actually common to also see buckets and bowls of water outside banks and other public offices, with security men requesting you to wash your hands before you get access to these workplaces. But that is no longer, the case. So to be honest, I'm afraid, but to say the truth, many of us have actually forgotten that
Yeah.
COVID-19, existed until recent developments, in China, Joker.
Right, Maxwell, thank you for your time today on Network Africa.
Anytime, Joker.
We have more stories on the program coming up in a moment, including KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa on high alert over flood warning. We'll give you details in a moment. Welcome back to the program. South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province is on high alert after a warning from the weather services that suggests large parts of the area can expect disrupted rainfall, which brings the probability of widespread flooding. Last year, the province was hit by devastating floods, which affected about 40,000 people and left at least 400 dead. Authorities have since issued flood safety advice, including telling people to avoid crossing low-lying bridges and to take care when driving. The weather services issued a level 9 warning for KwaZulu-Natal, which means that there could be a threat to life and displacement of people. Mozambique has issued warnings of a possible tropical storm in the southern coastal province of Gaza, where the heavy rains and possible flooding are also expected. But to start today, the National Institute of Meteorology has urged residents to take precautionary measures to fortify their houses and not venture outside where necessary. The Southern Africa region has witnessed increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, which the UN has linked to the climate crisis facing Africa. Mozambique said strong winds accompanied by rains of up to 50 millimeters per hour are expected. The Institute says the storm could affect the northern areas as well as those in the coast of the province. And Benin Republic is gearing up for legislative elections on Sunday, in which, unlike in 2019, people will be able to vote for opposition parties if they wish. 7 parties, 3 of which claim to be in opposition, are vying for the 109 seats in the National Assembly, 24 of which are reserved for women. President Patrice Talon, elected in 2016 and the re-elected in 2021, is regularly accused of having made an authoritarian shift in the name of development in a country once hailed for the dynamism of its democracy. But its primary opponents now live abroad, targeted by court cases in Benin, and several journalists have been arrested and a foreign journalist was expelled in recent years. The vote was marred by violence in 2019. Passengers and motorists going to the western parts of the country from eastern region could not contain their joy following the temporary opening of the second Niger bridge at midnight of Monday, the 2nd of January 2023. That's talking about here in Nigeria. The opening happened just after the access road from the Asaba end in the south-south was closed on the 2nd of January 2023 by the officials of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing.
The second Niger Bridge was opened to motorists on the 15th of December 2022 to ease the traffic congestion usually experienced by commuters plying the old Niger Bridge, especially during the Yuletide. In continuation of the official opening, road safety officials and the officers of the Federal Ministry of Works at the Asaba end of the second Niger Bridge are seen closing the passageway to motorists coming from the west. This is as they prepare for the temporary opening of the ancillary part of the infrastructure. This follows the promise by the federal government that the road will be closed on the 2nd of January to motorists leaving the eastern part of the country to enable others coming from the east to access the road.
We are reversing the traffic to motorists that are western bound, that is coming from Onitsha, Abia, Enugu, Owerri. We have access to use this second Niger bridge back to Asaba. So we need to change our barriers and install new road signs.
Within the first few days of the new year, the access road to the bridge from the Obosi end is open to road users, with security operatives seen directing traffic to ensure that drivers plying the bridge adhere to the signs on the bridge and other traffic rules. With the installation of directional signs, officials insist the move is to ensure free flow of traffic and to make the roads easily navigable and safer.
Yes, the signposts which were installed yesterday, and we are still doing some amendment too, they are to direct the traffic appropriately, because at where we are now, the traffic going by the left are to move to Obosi and to Onitsha, while those going to Asaba, Benin, Lagos axis are going by the right.
Motorists commend the federal government for the initiative.
I must confess, it's a blessing. Human beings are sensitive to suffering, and whenever you get the relief, you will appreciate it. We do appreciate this availability of this bridge. The timing, whenever we are coming home, you put about 2 or 3 hours to be wasted at Onitsha, but that has been cut off, so it means a lot to every traveler on these roads.
According to the officials, the temporary opening of the bridge will last till the 15th of January to enable contractors put finishing touches before the final inauguration.
We're back in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but this time focusing on the environment, something Patrick Chirimwani is passionate about. The Congolese artist is helping to minimize environmental pollution in his part of the country. His location is near the banks of Lake Kivu in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Take a look.
Patrick Chirimwani wades knee-deep through a mountain of plastic bottles, scooping as many as he can into a large sack. There is no public waste collection in the area, and the trash that ends up in Lake Kivu often causes breakdowns in the hydroelectric plant, leading to power cuts. But Patrick's goal is bigger than helping clean up. Later, he will melt down the plastic to make a thick liquid, which he uses to paint portraits of politicians, intended to be a condemnation of what he says is their inaction to protect the environment.
There have been many conferences in DR Congo, several meetings. But at these meetings, there was no mention of problems related to the destruction of the environment. No measures have been taken to protect nature. That is why, as an artist from the Democratic Republic of Congo, I can send a message along these lines.
Last month, the artist's portraits of political figures, from independence leader Patrice Lumumba to current President Felix Tshisekedi, were displayed at a cultural center in his hometown, Bukavu.
The big message today for the authorities, they must tell us how we're going to protect our environment. That's how I told myself that I must continue to use plastic waste such as bags, bottles, and use basins which I process and make drawings.
Congo, like other African nations, has insisted on its right to develop its economy by exploiting its vast natural resources. It has come under criticism for putting oil blocks up for auction in the world's second biggest rainforest. It has pledged to minimize the potentially devastating impact by using modern drilling methods and tight regulation. It also hosted talks before November's COP27 climate summit to call on rich nations to honor a pledge to developing nations to ensure fair finance to fight climate change.
That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.